characters, and we're going to be talking a little bit about RIT operations today. So before we get started, we'd just like to do a shout out to our buddies at Key Hose. Thank you for helping us with this, and we appreciate all the support for us in the fire service. Again, thanks to the ladies and gentlemen at Key Hose. So guys, we're going to talk about it today. So we'll start with a couple of the questions that we have. And if any of our listeners have any questions, especially while we're live, you can hit them up in the chat, and our man behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz, Mark, will address them and get them to us, hopefully so we can get them answered for you. So RIT operations is a topic that evokes some really strong ideas, opinions among fire officers. Some of the things that we have to think about is, number one, do you really expect a fireman in an extreme perilous situation when their life is in danger to remember the lunar acronym when he transmits a Mayday? So let's start with you, Chief Shaw.
No, I think it's unrealistic.
I mean,
if you look at any of the work that some of the guys have been doing, Jay Bresler is one of them with his leadership under fire, looking at a lot of the stuff that people are doing with the impact of stress on human performance. We know that when you're in a highly stressful situation, to ask someone to run through a mnemonic, which is good. I mean, it's a good thing for training because you're going to go back to that muscle memory when it happens. But what are you going to give them a written reprimand when staple it to their casket because they missed one of the A and the R? And I think a lot of times what do we really want to know? And that's where you would always say, is anyone who's in the fire service, like, you should challenge every conventional thought we have and pressure test it to make sure it's still accurate. And I think when you say lunar, it's a great thing to train on. It's a good thing to get into muscle memory. So when you do key the mic up, much like when we talk about CAN report, when you key the mic up, you think conditions, actions, need. If someone can get through all that, fantastic. But the reality is, what do you really need as an incident commander? Or what do you really need as a RIT? I need to know who, what, and where. That's a reality. It's like, I know who it is. Where are you? What exactly is your emergency? And then the rest of the information we can gain from you. But I think asking someone and being steadfast to, like, I must have your lunar. It's really easy when you're in a climate-controlled car in a sterile environment and you're asking someone in a situation who thinks they might die, I need you to give me all this information. And then what do you hear a lot of times chiefs do afterwards? They hit the evacuation button. Like, I just told you I think I'm going to die. Now you're telling everyone to leave the building. Like, I need people to come get me. So I think it is unrealistic. Good training tool, but I wouldn't hold so steadfast to it to think that someone in that situation is going to be able to hit every single one of those or remember that all those, everything is included in that mnemonic.
I agree. Darryl, what about you? What do you think about that, about the lunar?
Well, what's interesting is I do think that it's a two-way communication, and it might actually be even more handy for the individual receiving the Mayday, where they're in a more calm outside environment, certainly more calm than the person inside in peril, where they may just be getting bits and pieces of information. They may only hear Mayday, Mayday. And just having that at that command post to be able, and just a review for people that, may not be familiar with the acronym lunar: location, unit, name, assignment, and are you radio equipped, which that's a little dated also. But if you're only getting bits and pieces, you're the one that may be able to find out, where are you? What is your assignment? And that assignment is important because we may need somebody to continue that assignment. We need to know what job's not getting done, but what unit are they in? So we train on that both ways, for the command post to ask the member and for the member to radio out. But even in training, it's very difficult to get that. Even right after you reviewed it in the classroom, now you put on your gear and you go out into the Connex boxes or wherever you're training and trying to remember to call out that lunar report. And additionally, You know, and we'll probably get into this. There's a lot of other things that command's going to have to ask that member to do, like, turn on their flashlight, activate their pass, slow their breathing. Can you get to a window? Other things that we may be giving them direction on.
And I know with the fire service, a lot of times people change things. And with the lunar, I know a lot of units and a lot of jobs have changed it from radio equipped, because you're giving them Mayday, to resources needed. So I think that's a good thing to if you're going to use it, to put it in there. What do you need to get you out of this trouble? What's going on? What happened? And I think that's a good thing.
And Mike, I'll add something to it, because the Mayday may also come from another member calling a Mayday because they're missing a member, or they became aware of somebody that just went through a floor. And you may, I know nowadays, most every member, I hope, has a radio. When I started, only the officer had a radio, and on the truck, the driver and officer had a radio. And so not everybody was radio equipped, but those radio systems, I'm no radio expert by any means, but when two mics were keyed close together, it would send like a feedback. And Mike, you might be able to add a little more to this, but that, knowing if they were radio equipped, that could be used as a search technique, trying to see if you get some feedback as you're getting closer to them. Is that the case?
Yes, we used to use it called feedback assisted rescues, where you would feed and you would get two people remote, and you would key the mics and then listen for the speaker on the down firefighters. You'd have everybody else turn their radio down and listen for the speaker on the down firefighters radio. So it's another tool in the toolbox. You can do it, but it's not, I don't think it's as, with all the new stuff, I don't think it's as necessary. It's a good tool, but I don't think it's as necessary as all the other stuff we have with the unit, with the location stuff, and all of the other stuff that's coming down the pike now. So the three amigos, what do you guys say about lunar?
Actually, we're the Beastie Boys today, Captain.
Oh, the Beastie Boys. All right, you got to fight for your right, Clark.
Fight for your right, boss. My first question would be, I would like to hear if anyone has any kind of recorded radio transmission where they gave a lunar and it worked. All right. Again, it's one of these things. I think it's one of these things we're checking boxes, and someone came up with this, and we've been all training on it for years and years and years. Has it ever really been implemented, and what percentage is it implemented, and what percentage is it successful? So that's going to be your I'm kind of personally, I'm tired of the policies. People make these policies and they never train. We never actually use these policies. And we know in the field they're not going to work. So that would be my first question.
Yeah, it's coming down to habits, rituals, and routines. Develop them, keep training on them. So when it does happen, you're not going to know how you're going to behave. So develop those habits, rituals, and routines. So when it does happen, hopefully you can switch modes and get in that comfortable zone where you do have that acronym that you can attempt to reach out. I mean, what do you think?
How about you, Mike D?
Oh, jeez. Listen, you got to keep it simple. LIP, we use LIP, and I think that works well. Location identification and what the problem is. Think about the LIP acronym. Location. There's a big difference between calling a Mayday in a big box or a single family dwelling. Location is vital. How about identification too, man? Who are we looking for? Very important piece of the puzzle. And then I think this gives the prompt for the RIT teams what the problem is. Using P in that acronym, what's the problem? Out of air, I need the RIT pack. I got to supply air to them. Building collapse. You might want to think about other tools, airbags. I'm down in a hole. A rigging system, some ladders. So I think there's a lot of information that can be extracted from just a simple LIP one, and it's easier to remember. Like I said, lunar, you're not going to remember that at 3 a.m. When it comes down to a RIT application, man, you got to keep it simple so the guys can be able to think. Can you imagine the hesitation of lunar? Oh, what the heck does that mean? Keep it simple. We got to get your resources to them. And that's just my input on that too. A lot of information in those 3 words.
And I think that's very important. And the other thing is, very honestly, and I know we are all students of the fire service, but anybody who's ever gone and listened to a Mayday of a brother that's in real trouble, it's not the way you think it's going to go. It never is. And I have never heard, as Clark said, anybody ever give us a lunar over the radio and everything else. I've heard the people, I'm trapped, come get me, help me, I'm running out of air, I'm out of air, whatever it is. And it never never goes good. And I think that's part of what we have to come to an understanding of. How are we going to do this, and how are we going to come through this? And it kind of leads into the next question, which I think is a very interesting. Considering that a vast majority of the Maydays are resolved by the member's company or other companies operating nearby, do we really want to change radio frequencies for the companies not directly involved in the search and rescue operations? Go ahead. I'm going to give it to Clark, Brent, and Jimmy on that one, because I know I have specific thoughts on that, and I will go with you guys.
Sure. I guess, when it comes to high rise, I'm not a fan of switching those radio channels, because we're looking at, the fire floor, the floor above, and the floor below. And we know communications are bad. We know we have a chief with the DVRS system on. So now we're switching channels. Now we're losing communications. The concrete, the metal, and now the glass has that film on it that stops the radio transmissions. So now we're going to lose communications to kind of narrow down that firefighter. But we can do better. And if it's for a high rise, let's change that RIT protocol, make it a little bit different. And let's get that fourth and fifth truck, the ones that are doing ventilation, the ones that are doing other tasks, already on that other radio channel. So when that Mayday does happen, it's just that it's those 3 floors or maybe 4 floors of firefighters focused that have the DVRS backup. In our world, we have communications modules similar to the FDNY's post radio, but we can't go off that channel to come back on it again. Once you lose it, you lose it. So I think for high rise, and just speaking high rise, I think we can't change that radio channel. That's my 2 cents.
Jimmy?
It's going to cause confusion. I wear my radio under my coat, and we have the radio. When you switch, it'll notify you what channel you're on when you switch. But I think chances are low that every single operator on a fire scene is going to successfully change that radio in the field, potentially a low visibility environment while they're working. I can't see that actually happening.
I agree.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jimmy. Anything you got? Any?
Oh, Cappy, I'm going to tell you because I've been on the end user or on the end of these RIT or Maydays deployment. 2 things I wanted to mention on this. The first thing is about that is that a lot of these Maydays happen to occur within that first 5 minutes using the first 2 companies that are in there. We don't have a RIT chief in place. It's pretty common to have a RIT chief be dedicated to that RIT team, but they're not on the scene yet. Now you're telling people to switch radios. The incident commander cannot handle 2 radios or 2 separate simultaneous things going on. You got the fire to deal with, and you got the Mayday to deal with. So what we do is we try to keep everyone on the channel. It's another thing that we also don't independently change radios just because there's a Mayday. Oh, policy says I got to switch to a different channel. Now you're operating a fire on 2 different frequencies. The incident commander will let you and advise you what to do, because that's when it goes south, when you have companies they're operating independently of each other. Keep them all on the same radio. If the necessitates the need for a change, that will be known, or that announcement would be made. But we want to corral everyone, keep the cats in order here till we can get a handle on this thing.
I agree with you, brother. I agree with you. Daryl, go ahead. What do you think about that?
Well, that is very common out my way for Mayday policies to say that the member is hitting an emergency button, and that's going to give them priority channel, and it's going to change the channel, and that command is asking everybody to go to a channel. I was there when a lot of these departments went to this, and I've tried to wrap my head around this quite a bit, even working as training captain and doing, simulations and all. And I just find I can't wrap my head around that making things better. Now, I think on any type of incident, whether it's an MCI, some multi-vehicle accident, earthquake, whatever it is, fires, there may become a time that you have to, and there will be times that you have to go to multiple channels to kind of have some division of labor. But to automatically make the assumption that there's going to be so much radio traffic in the removal of the firefighter, the search of the firefighter, and the fire operation, I think will add confusion. And it seems like we have consensus on this. There's many times, and I think almost anybody listening or on here has just been to a regular first alarm fire, and not everybody's on the correct channel. Now to get everybody to switch to their respective channel, even if that is accomplished, it is still not automatically making things better. The only thing that's going to make things better for that firefighter is to get to them, get them air, and get them out of the building. And if that requires another radio channel for whatever's going on, then we could keep that in the back of our mind. But I do feel like it's just going to add a ton of confusion.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that's a very good point. And again, it becomes a problem. Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at our own history, right? I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with all the brothers on here that it's a terrible idea. Because if you look at line of duty deaths and you peel back the onion, you want to do an audit before you even get to a line of duty death and say, hey, how would my organization be? When someone shows up to do a line of duty death report, the two main things they're going to look at is your training and your doctrine. And use any example you want. A basement fire. Do you train on it? And what's your doctrine for basement fires? Then why are you surprised things went really bad? Because 4 hose lines went through the front door and went down the basement. They got stuck and guys got burned. So the same thing is with the radio. If you're going to switch channels, I would challenge you to say, how often do you train your personnel to go in an ideal age, do a task, zero visibility, in the most stressful environment they could ever be in when they hear a brother or sister calling a Mayday and say, change your channel and do it appropriately? Oh, well, we got the audio thing that tells you when you do it. Okay, so there's 10 guys in a room and everyone's radio is going 4 Alpha, 4 Bravo, 4. It's completely unrealistic. So if you don't train on it, why would you ever implement that in the most chaotic of situations? And then I hear sometimes when people do want to switch, it's like, well, we have the fireground operations going on, and then we have the Mayday. Well, to me, I would challenge that and say, then you really don't have good doctrine to say how we're going to operate on a fireground, because for most organizations, either you're striving to do it, or you borrowed from places, or you developed your own, but you have an SOG, an SOP, or an ops manual on how you're going to operate on a basement fire. Let's just use that for example. The first line is going to go to the basement if there's an exterior entrance. The second line is going to go to the floor above. The truck, or the first rescue is going to search on the fire floor. The other one's going to be on the floor. So you know where they are. So really, you just need everyone to maintain the firefight while you deploy the RIT, or keep an eye out for that downed firefighter. So it's one of those things. I think it sounds great in theory, but it's almost unrealistic and borderline dangerous in practice. Because if you do have, let's say you do switch channels, what do we know about the history of Maydays? Well, Maydays typically breed Maydays. So if I'm the incident commander, I'm trying to run 2 channels, then I get 2 Maydays on 2 different channels. There is no way I'm going to ever be successful at that. So I think, the greater emphasis should be on, hey, if you call Mayday, you get to own the channel, and that because you think you're in danger. And then we shouldn't be exposed for the lack of training or the lack of doctrine or discipline we have on the fireground when that does occur. And to Daryl's point, like, the EA is a really huge part. And I would tell anyone, like, you should go read Josh Laird's Line of Duty Death Report from Frederick, in which we spent a lot of time on that. And one of the things we asked every single person who was involved in Mayday is, what does that orange button do? And again, it goes back to training. And your organization's different. I mean, those radios are pre-programmed that when you push that, they're meant for cops. They're meant so they can keep shooting without having to talk on the radio. So if you don't know how that EA button works, You don't know how long your P0. You don't know if it blocks the entire channel. On a Mayday is not the time to figure it out. But if they do own it, then if you have good operational discipline, okay, well, you deserve the channel. If you think you're going to die, I should be able to talk to you and be able to tell you I got resources coming to you and what exactly your problem is so we can mitigate it.
And I agree. And I think the other thing that a lot of departments do not train on in these situations is radio discipline. Like, excuse me, I can't tell you the number of Maydays I have listened to on the air where I hear a guy come, all right, back it up 10 feet, bring it here, get me a 24-foot ladder, give me 5 more pounds on the knob. We don't need it. Don't even worry about that. Send a runner if you have to. Understand, go back, send a guy back to the pump panel, whatever you have to do, but don't eat up the radio time for this, because you are putting that brother or sister at risk. And it's very important. And radio discipline is not taught in a lot of organizations.
Well, Mike, I don't think radios are any part of radio communication training is done for a lot of places. I mean, when can you think we would ever give someone a $12,000 device and say, good luck? I mean, when would we give you an SCBA and say, yeah, you'll figure it out? So organizationally, we kind of drop the ball on that we don't really train people on, hey, we give you this radio, here's how it works, here's how you should talk on it.
And what to communicate and what I want you to say and how I want you to become, and train them on all of these things. And the other thing is on the emergency alert button. What does it do to that radio? Does it boost the signal up? On a lot of them, it boosts the signal up. Now it's going to block out other radios in the area of people that we might be finding. So it's something that's very, very important that the radios, I mean, I know the FDNY did whole classes on our annual education day on the radios. The guys went through the radios at everything, and they got the job to give us radios for the classroom, for the guys to go over it and put your gloves on and do it with your gloves on and try to figure it out, how to feel along with the gloves and what you're changing and everything else. How many times have you seen somebody turn the volume down when they thought they were changing the channel? So, Darryl, what do you think about that with the radios?
No, when things start to get really chaotic and everybody's talking on the radio, I think the incident commander can really set the tone by just sending out a message. Everybody, I know everybody's got a lot to say. Keep radio transmissions to a minimum, and, urgent messages only at that time. Like you said, we've had face-to-face communication. Most of the stuff at the firefighter rescue is going to be face-to-face communication. We're going to just be dealing with that person right there. The transmission is going to be like, hey, we've got them out to the stairwell, or we need an ambulance downstairs, or they're conscious, unconscious, whatever's going on. We need a hose line, whatever tools you need, but not everybody needs to be talking. And that transmission can just come from the IC to say, hey, everybody cool it down and let's cool it on the radio.
And definitely I have heard some ICs, and I don't think they were as kind as you were, telling people to get off the radio, where they were like, listen, I got somebody in trouble, and they give you what they think you need to hear. And I think that's important. Clark, Brent, and Jimmy, what do you think, boys?
Jimmy, talking about training. Yeah, it really comes down to that big picture. What's the big scope? And again, my expertise is high rise, and it's that second radio channel for ventilation, the second radio channel that takes up all that chatter, but focus on the fireground channel. And you're going to have less rate. When we broke down high rise communications, we found the actual fire attack had the less radio communications. It was the ventilation that filled the channel. So you're coming in that fourth and fifth and truck in my world, and you're already going to that next channel. That frees up the firefighters that are on air, the firefighters that are in danger, to be able to call that Mayday and not worry about excess chatter. So it's really the big picture prepare for that Mayday by, developing the SOPs or the SOGs to target when do we have that second radio channel prior to that Mayday even happening. Let's reduce the amount of chatter on the firefighters on the the life threatening like water supply may not have to be on the fire attack channels, so to speak.
Yeah, and that my point in this too, and I wanted to, and we haven't talked about that too, is that a lot of the Maydays go unheard. I think it's like 45% of the time, and that's true. And that is true because the Mayday is buried in normal, or as we see, radio traffic on the fireground. There's been several instances I know on my department, which is a really good to place emphasis to keep your head on a swivel, to keep your ears open, because other people on that fireground heard a Mayday. They're like, did you just hear a Mayday? Did you just hear the Mayday? And we've had that where engineers on a pump panel or the AMBO on the scene has heard that. He says that the incident commander isn't acknowledging. If by the second time, and this is what happened, there's no acknowledgement, he says, oh, the incident commander's got to acknowledge it. You're going to have to acknowledge it and then run that to the incident commander. There's a Mayday going on. He may have not heard it. And that's true. And that's true to life. And that's things that happen on the fireground that I've seen and witnessed or heard of too. So that may not be clear cut. Again, it's a fluid fireground, but remember, it's either buried or you may be the only one who heard it. The only one.
That's an excellent point, Jimmy, because a lot of RIT teams, it's easy to feel like, you're in the batter's box and you're sitting outside and you're not part of the action, and things can get a little complacent saying hi to friends walking by and things like that. And, that's just the reality. But people need to have their eyes on the building in case they see something, and they need to have their ear on that radio mic and listen and stay ahead of what's going on, because you may be the only people outside of that building or, that are not directly involved that are going to hear that message. Other people are working and, dealing with the sound of fans and smoke detectors and rigs running at the pump panel and all these other things. Be action oriented. Keep your ear on the mic and your eyes on the building, because things happen very quickly.
And I got two things to add to that, Darrell, which is a very good point. One was a dear friend of mine who I studied with for lieutenant, was at a fire as a newly promoted lieutenant and thought he heard a Mayday and nobody else heard it. And he said, I'm brand new. I must be mistaken. And he didn't do anything. And it turned out to be an FDNY line of duty death. And he will never forgive himself for that. So I think that's very important. If you think you heard a Mayday, say, I think I heard a Mayday, and make sure command gets that so they can clear the airwaves and go back and listen for that. The other thing is, we had a Mayday at a fire in a taxpayer, a commercial 2-story building. We had a Mayday and nobody heard it because of all the saws in the front running with the gates and everything else. So we changed our policy that one member goes into a rig with the doors closed and only of the RIT team, and monitors the radio, monitors the handy-talkie sitting in the rig in a quiet area so that they understand what's going on. And I think that's a great thing to do. And while we're talking about great things, I just want to again thank our friends at Key Hose for sponsoring us. We appreciate their support for us being here, and it's a good thing. So thank you, Key Hose. We appreciate it. The next thing, and this one drives me crazy, is it still necessary to sound the apparatus air horns for an evacuation signal? Darrell, go ahead.
I can't really say I have any strong feelings on that. I've worked in a department that had that procedure, and another that didn't do that at all. I think working in an organization where we had a lot of small departments around, and not everybody had exactly the same policy. It was just adding some confusion because it meant one thing to one department, another to another department. But yeah, we didn't have that procedure necessarily in the Oakland Fire Department. We would just, tell everybody to evacuate on the radios. So yeah, I'm interested to hear what others say.
Chief Shaw.
Before I hit that, I'm sort of looking at Clark, Brent, and Jimmy, and they said Beastie Boys, but I think it's more like Statler and Waldorf from the Muppets. They used to sit up in the box. They just added a third guy. But anyway, so to Daryl's point, like, this is one of the things we actually had a really deep conversation with in the Northern Virginia region to talk about this, because I was undecided in a sense, because there can be some merit that if we lose radio communications and you hear the evacuation signal, you hear those air horns going off, that's a telltale sign. So one of the things we did to kind of test that was during training while we were in the middle of in the burn buildings with our companies. How the companies hit the air horn, see what the reaction was by our people. No one moved. So again, sounded good in theory, but didn't really work in practice. I was always kind of stuck on the part of, if I want to communicate, well, it's twofold. One, why am I evacuating the building if I'm in the middle of a writ? If I'm evacuating a particular area, okay, because we're going to hyper focus on this particular area. I don't need all the companies on the floor above, whatever the case may be. But in that critical point when I want to communicate and listen to that person calling a Mayday, there's going to be 8 companies wailing on their air horns. And so, I think it's one of those things that, I wouldn't condemn someone if they did have it in their organization, but also if you got rid of it, I would say, it seems like kind of common sense that you would be willing to give up that one additional safeguard of getting as an audible alarm to get people out of a building, but you're also not interrupting that communications and that ability to listen when an air horn's going off for 10 to 15 seconds.
Hey, Dan, now since you're saying that, I'm kind of reflecting on my career, and I started when not everybody had radios, and I'm questioning if that was a tactic that was more necessary, because a lot of firefighters on the fireground just did not have a radio, but now we do.
Yeah, and the counter to that is, what do you have? You have a lot of officers a lot of times to tell the firefighters what? Turn the radio down while I have my radio up. Well, if I'm the guy who calls the Mayday, all your radios are down, you can remember to turn your radio back up. So there's a lot of pros and cons to it. I agree with you. I think it is a bit of an antiquated tactic that was replaced by the technology of having everyone have radios.
It's
Go ahead, guys.
It's happened to me twice over my career, and the one fire was a factory fire. There's no writ, there's no trouble. The incident commander calls everyone to evacuate, and the captain says, "You know what? We got this. We got, give me another minute, give me another 2 more minutes." And being a junior firefighter, you start getting uncomfortable, but then you hear the air horns. And then both me and the senior firefighter said to the captain, "Hey, this is serious. We all got to go." They just signaled. And the captain's like, "Fine." But he kept pushing, even though we were told to get out. And then once the air horn blew, "Hey, Cap, the air horn's going. It's now we have no choice." So in that case, it worked for me.
Kirk, anything?
So I'd like to, before we even get to the air horn, I'd like to ask everyone a question: is how do you describe a building that does not have a business in it and is closed? Do you refer to that as an abandoned building? Do you refer to that as a vacant building? Do you refer to that as an unoccupied building? And I would challenge you, if you describe a building as an abandoned building, and you're on the radio and we go on scene, and this is an old Kmart building, we're on scene of an abandoned building, right? And we're interior fighting fire, and the chief gets on, "Hey, chief's on scene of an abandoned building," and we are inside fighting fire, and we hear over the radio, did he just say abandon the building or an abandoned building? How close is that? And if you're humping down hose and you have your hood up and you're moving and you're flowing water and you hear abandoned building on the radio, and you stop and say, "I think he said it's an abandoned building. Let's keep fighting fire." I would personally challenge everyone to completely eliminate that description from your vocabulary, and that word should only be used one time in the fire service, and that is when it is to get out of the building immediately. So as far as our company goes, our department, it is either a vacant building or it's an unoccupied building, but it is never an abandoned building. Just my soapbox. Carry on.
Great point on that too. To back with you, Daryl, the air horns were used back in the, it's a carryover tradition because we didn't have radios like Captain Mike said. Usually the officer or the guy in the truck, whoever's making the roof. Nowadays, they keep that built in as a redundancy. How about the fireman who left his radio back at the firehouse? How about the somebody who heard the battery chirping but never changed the battery is operating on the fireground with a dead battery? So all that was is just a fail-safe system for that. That's a system that I grew up in on my department. 30 seconds of short bursts, not big, long truck driver ear holes, short bursts of 30. So it distinguishes the sound, not long ones, but they're short. The short one knows it's time to exit the building, and reinforced by radio traffic being set on the radio.
I think you just hit on something that we can't always rely on technology. And even if those radios are working, you're around circular saws or something else, and you couldn't hear it. And I do think those air horns could be like, hey, that they're not messing around. They're saying get the hell out of here, you know.
All right, so we got a lot of opinion on this, and I think our listeners and our viewers have to come up with their own ideas of how this is going to work for them and what they wanted doing it. But the idea that maybe we're going to make them the short blasts might work well for some of these departments to key that is definitely what we're looking for there. One of the questions that is always asked a lot about rapid intervention is why are so many rapid intervention operations far from rapid? And we can go back to the Southwest Supermarket with Brett Tarver. We can go back to some of the other people trapped, the Nance, and all of those other drills. Why? So go ahead. Why don't you take it, Daryl?
Well, I think we all have our own experiences, and fortunately, the down firefighters I dealt with in our career, it was pretty rapid, and it was almost always firefighters that were in the area. Some that come to mind are members that fell through a floor. The last one, we had 2 unconscious firefighters in an elevator in a high rise, and the rapid intervention team had just arrived to the fire floor. And so the one that we had that was not rapid was the year I came on the job just before starting the academy, and that was because it was a floor collapse that took the life of a firefighter and ended 2 others' career, and that's because they were trapped, and it was a very involved with airbags and cribbing and all of that, and so that's not going to be rapid in any situation. But I don't think we can use that as a blanket statement. Sometimes it's going to be rapid, sometimes it's going to be very, very involved, and there's no way that we can have a blanket statement. But I think we need to be prepared for those longer, more involved operations, which might lead back to, the multiple radio channels and things like we were talking about earlier.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Daryl, and I think to your point, Mike, I think where we see that is because the way we've trained people. We've built this mentality that the rapid intervention team has to come to the front of the building and then essentially unpack an entire rescue squad or truck company and lay it in the front yard. And then when they deploy, they're gonna take all this stuff with us, and that's where we're not looking at our own history, because if you're gonna do all that, you're not rapid intervention, you're eventual intervention. There's no way you're gonna ever get to there. But if you look at our own history in the American Fire Service, why do people call Maydays? Right? They're trapped by fire, they're lost, or they're out of air, or you have the catastrophic. There's a collapse, thing of that nature. So if we focus on those 3, right? You're lost, you're trapped by fire, or you're out of air. Well, then what should the RIT have? The RIT should have a hose line, and the RIT should have air. And then everyone else who shows up so for us in our organization, the 4th due engine is always the RIT. And as soon as you have a working fire, you get a RIT task force, which means you get more resources. And the idea being is that that engine would go mitigate whatever that immediate situation is. If I got to keep the fire off of you, great. If I got to get air to you, great. If I need a tagline to get out of the building, I took a hose line with me. If it's collapsed, let's get a good idea, keep the fire off you and keep air to you. And then the additional resources after that RIT goes and does that deployment can say, hey, we got a firefighter who's trapped by his legs. We need X, Y, and Z. But we also see in a lot of line of duty deaths, the majority of the time is not spent finding the firefighters. They're found by other companies in close proximity, or they're found very swiftly. It's the removal that takes a bit of a time. And so a lot of your resources be dedicated to that. So I think if we really want to break that mentality is the way we train. I mean, if you're training your personnel to empty an entire ladder truck in the front yard, because I never heard anyone ever call Mayday and say, I'm Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. I need a Stokes basket and 3 chainsaws. No one ever says that. You know, they say, I'm trapped by fire. Okay, let's just keep a hose line and keep the fire off you until we can figure out how we get you out of there. So I think it's just looking at our history and rethinking. If we really want to be rapid, then we got to move swiftly, and we got to understand what might be the problem that the firefighters call a Mayday for.
And I think that hose line is vitally important. And the other thing is to make sure that the men and women on the initial attack know that there is a Mayday, and that initial attack has to stay fighting that fire, because that's what's going to protect our brother or sister that's in trouble. That we have to keep up fire attack. And that's vitally important. It's vitally important. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Oh, Cap, that's a great illustration, and we use it in our officer training too. Is a one scenario too. You hear a Mayday, he gets on the line. I'm burning up. I'm burning up. I'm burning up. And then you have the hose line. You're the officer on the hose line. That was one of the questions. You go help the brother, or do you continue to put what you're doing, putting water on the fire? Putting water on that fire and suppressing that fire may be the thing that's keeping him alive as well. So that was a good point. It doesn't mean a Mayday to abandon your post or
abandon.
Oh, geez. Yeah,
I thought we just went over this.
Yeah,
did we just not go over this?
But still keep doing, and that's another misnomer.
Don't vacate your position.
Exactly. Better yet, Chief. That's why you're Chief.
And don't let a truckie take over the line.
That too. So you see where I'm going with that too. It does not necessitate you to vacate what you're doing. The vital fireground functions need to be done and supported, because that may be the only thing that is going to get a really good head start or jump start on that RIT team, but also things that are necessary for that man or woman's survival on the fireground too. Hold the task, keep on task.
Yeah.
I would say RIT might not be rapid because of complacency and lack of common sense. I'm sure everyone has seen this. You get the assignment on a residential fire, you get a RIT assignment, and what do you first thing you do is just start trash talking the chief, right? All right, who pissed the chief off? Why did we get this lousy assignment? And then you're going to sit there on the bumper and be pissed off, and you're not paying attention to radio traffic, and you don't monitor the hose line. If you know that engine 15 is on fire attack and you're on RIT, you should probably take a look at where that hose line coming off engine 15 is, where it goes into the building. And if it's a different colored hose, you might want to pay attention to that. So if engine 15 has a RIT, you know what you're looking for. There's a lot of things we can do in preparation for RIT deployment that most people don't. Another thing that I see across the country is RIT is in charge of softening the structure. So RIT, we get assigned RIT, so we're going to do a 360. We're going to take a rotary saw. The RIT team might be cutting bars. The RIT team might be split up in different locations, and then we get a RIT deployment. Mayday, 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 deploy the RIT, and I've got one member on the Charlie side who's running a rotary saw, and he can't hear the radio. I've got another member trying to capture utilities, and now I'm going to have to go with 360 and try to organize my RIT team and bring them back and then deploy. So I think you should have someone doing outside duties, and then you should have a dedicated RIT team. Outside duties is obviously softening the structure thing. The RIT is simply paying attention and ready to deploy, especially if it is a commercial structure. If you read any work from Don Abbott from the Project Mayday he's done out of Arizona, fantastic information. And commercial structures, 41% of the Maydays occur in commercial structures, which is significant considering only approximately 15% of our fires are in commercial structures. So that is a significant number of Maydays. And in addition to information coming from Project Mayday, about 86% of Maydays occur from the first two companies on scene. So if you're in a commercial structure and you're one of the first two companies, you are statistically at the highest risk of anything we do in the fireground. So if you are a RIT team on a commercial structure, it is time to pay attention, pay close attention, and start developing a plan on how you're going to get in and how you're going to get out. And my last point is common sense. Yeah, common sense. I see this a lot for residential structures, just like Chief Shaw was saying. We're going to unload the whole truck and we're going to put it in the yard, right? And I always see, it's funny, commercial structure, no bars on. I'm sorry, residential structure, light frame construction, no bars on the windows or anything, and the gas-powered rotary saw comes off the truck and it's sitting there. And I always ask the guy, "Hey, why do you have the rotary saw?" "Oh, that's part of the RIT cache, sir." I said, what do you think we're going to cut? Any steel we're going to cut inside of this house? And especially in this environment, in a smoky environment, is your power saw, is your gas powered saw even going to work? And they just look at me like, it's part of the RIT cache, sir. It's part of the RIT cache, sir. There's not a lot of common sense because they just don't have a lot.
So Clark, you guys have homes without bars down there?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
That's
Yes.
crazy.
That's interesting.
This is a very important point to the listeners and those that are company officers in command. This is important. Did you guys remember that phrases or trigger words? There are certain words or fire conditions that is highly likely to go into a Mayday. Two of them, I think, was can't find the fire, heavy smoke conditions. You might want to start really listening to the radio, because I think on those key phrases, there was like 8 phrases that anytime those 8 phrases were said, there's about an 80% chance of those turning into a Mayday. And that was from Dot Abbott's. So there's a time, actually predictability or likelihood that this may be a potential Mayday.
That's also,
And also when you're talking big box, Clark was talking about yesterday, you have this big box store, you don't have one RIT team, you're going to have multiple points of entry. You're going to start getting more RIT team. You're going to start, getting more resources. And if your RIT team has to go from the alpha side to the bravo side, it's your class yesterday. It was excellent.
Yep. Good point, man.
Same with high rise, your RIT team's not on the lot, one floor below.
And on that, let me talk about that. Now, why Brent, on a high rise is RIT one floor below? Why do you put RIT one floor below on a high rise?
Because they're getting the layout of the land.
Yeah.
They're going to size up the floor plate. They're going to look at the stairs. They're going to know that, the other entrances and exits. And also for the vertical response time, if those elevators fail, you're already in position. You just took an 80-story building and made it a 2-story residential house, and you're going to be able to respond quicker because you're already at the stairs.
So I agree. So what I'm hearing Brent say is, so you're going to put RIT one floor below fire attack because we want to keep RIT as close to the companies in the most dangerous area, correct? So that's why we want them right below fire attack, the fire floor. Well, I would argue that you send companies above the fire. If you're in a 40-story building and you got a fire on 10, and your companies are responsible for above the fire, they're responsible for 30 stories. All right. How many in any of our organizations on the call here, even listening? How many people in our organization are capable of climbing 40 stories with full gear? And do you think we're going to have some health emergencies? Are we going to have some health emergencies on like the 25th or 30th floor? Mm-hmm. And so now our RIT team's on 9, and I have a cardiac arrest on 29. How long is that RIT team going to take to get there? Jesus. And Jimmy, wasn't that a line of duty in yours? He was killed. He had a heart attack.
That's correct on that too. These are great points. You can't have all the coverage on that, but that's a good point. In the necessity, you may not be a RIT team, but a rapid ascent team, there by default would be a RIT team. The only thing that they're missing is ALS equipment. And I think if we look specifically at high rises, you need ALS equipment, you need defibrillators, preferably an ALS RIT company. I know at our fires, we send an ALS RIT. So if we do have a fireman go down, we are going to work them in a safe area. We're not dragging them downstairs. You got to give your brother or sister the benefit of the doubt. So that's another entertainment to think in your RIT policies, especially with tall buildings and usage of stairs, ALS provisions, getting some medics up there.
Ours is brought up on the third and truck brings that. So the third and truck is one floor below. They're the IRIT. They're still a RIT team being dispatched, but they're IRIT with medical, with defib. On the third in apparatus, 2 firefighters are the IRIT, and then they'll be joined by a 4-person RIT team. So that helps the ventilation sector and helps the fire attack sector.
I think that's all good stuff. And now, does anybody in their organization, do they put RIT teams, if you're doing that 40-story building, you got the fire on 10, does anybody put another RIT team above the fire for all of those people doing search and evacuation above the fire? Because usually we say that a group doing search above the fire can only do a maximum of 5 floors, a maximum. And that's probably being very generous because of the air supply, okay? But does anybody bring another RIT team to above the fire? Go ahead, Chief Shaw.
Well, I think, Mike, you kind of opened a Pandora's box. It's like your RIT should reflect the number of companies that are engaged. If you have 2 alarms operating, you have 4 people, you don't have a RIT. And so, you know,
there's multiple areas, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, that's when, you know, if I'm listening to this from the command and control aspect of it, this is why it's a huge argument for, or conversation for, you should have a command post that's a command team, not one incident commander, because you need to have a division in labor. So one of the first things you should have is a RIT group, and then that RIT group should be led by a battalion chief to say you have the autonomy to separate your resources based upon where our resources are operating. So you don't have 4 companies sitting the floor below, but hey, maybe I'm gonna put 2 companies a floor up, 2 companies here, we're good. Or to you guys are talking about like having the ALS capability in close proximity so we can get a firefighter out very quickly if we do have a Mayday. So I think it really opens the door to, you have to have strong command and control if you want to have that trickle down to good RIT operations, because you got to have that supported with resources and supported with infrastructure, and then also have the autonomy to read the situation.
I agree wholeheartedly. A RIT task force. The RIT task force, depending on the size of the alarm, should have a battalion chief, at least 1 engine and 1 truck, preferably 2 engines and 2 trucks. Now, again, it's resource heavy, and for some departments, that's very difficult to do because they don't have the resources working. But you need to have people available to do this. And the last thing I want to say before we go with our closing arguments, because our closing statements, we're getting close, is how many of you have ever shown up as a company officer and looked at the crew you've been assigned for this day? And there are a couple of brand new guys, a guy with a year, maybe a guy with 2 years, and then you get assigned as a RIT. Is it your duty to go to the incident commander and say, hey, listen, I don't think we're going to be a great RIT. This is my team today, and I don't think we're going to be a great RIT. I don't know what your feelings are on this, but I would love to hear them.
It's a great conversation.
It's happening to me right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've been in that, felt that way specifically for RIT, but we're always going to have a variety of different, skill levels and things like that. I certainly have my own weaknesses in areas and acknowledge that as well. But I would say that talking about this at roll call, I would always try to say at roll call, my expectations, if we're first due, second due, third due, and if we were the RIT team. And getting back to, I guess we were talking about different locations of RIT team and kind of expanding the coverage. What we're mostly dealing with is the house fire. And even with our 4-person RIT team, I would always, and it wasn't just a standard in our job, but I would always have us split up. I wanted 2 of us in the back, 2 of us in the front for those eyes on the building, because the rear of the house often, we have a lot of topography and hillside homes, so we can't always just be standing on the back of a steep hillside, but at least even if we could only see the front, that we're at both corners, so we are looking at the building as much as we can. But if you have, good standard operating procedures, I think that mitigates a lot of the, decision making that really has to happen, but just those expectations. And then the other thing is, if there is an activation, I wasn't expecting all 4 of us just to go rush in. 2 of us were going to go do some recon, and we could call back if we need a hose line or another tool or something else. So we're not all going in and then somebody's running out to get something and coming back.
Yeah, I think I would say first, nice try, Captain. Needs to be written.
Okay.
But no, the reality is, I think, is I go back to how we try to keep it basic. For us, I think this is true across the United States. Everyone's hiring enormous amounts of people. So we have a very young organization. But what I'm asking them to do is to stretch a hose line, apply 8 pounds of force, and put water on that fire. I'm not asking you to go do a technical rescue. So I think for our initial RIT, like to Daryl's point, I think we're all going to have that. And I think everyone can make an argument for today. I don't have the best crew, but that's why you want to have the assembling of resources like a RIT task force as soon as you have a working fire to complement that, to build up that repertoire of what you want to have. But what we're asking them is, hey, I need you to put water on fire and supply air. And that's a basic fundamental. And then I would also challenge, if I'm sitting down at the kitchen table, I'm like, oh, what we're going to train on today? We're going to train on if we have a RIT deployment, what we're going to really do and how this is going to operate, what our assignments are going to be.
Excellent. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Just remember too, and another point, over the years, it's so easy. You got a RIT team out there who are just standing on the alpha side that they look at that and says, oh man, I can put another 4 or 5 people into this fire and utilize a RIT company. We just have to remind ourselves and have discipline that that RIT team is there for us. And then you need to address that also if you're going to deploy that and I'm talking when people's lives are in peril, you got to deploy them for civilian rescue, that you have some means to getting another RIT team in there. That's another topic of discussion.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Clark. Anything else?
In our agency, we hired 200 people in the last. We have almost 1,000 people on the job, and 200 of them were hired in the last 3 years. So just like everybody here, we've got a very young department. Every single day, I have a rookie or a 1-year fireman on my crew, and I would say not just RIT. How about if we get assigned vertical ventilation and I look in the back seat, I have a rookie and a 1-year fireman, and they're going to be expected to go to the roof of a commercial and start cutting holes in a commercial. I could easily tell the chief, you might want to reassign that, or a commercial fire attack or something like that with a 1-year fireman and a rookie fireman. It's what we have. It is what we have. And I would like to say, years ago, I took a class from a guy named Ed Hadfield. He was at Firetown training. And he said he requires a minimum of 5 years experience from his firefighters. So if he has a rookie, the other firefighter has to have 5 years on, a 4-1. So combined experience of 5 years. And I thought that was good. On paper, that's fantastic on paper. We'll never have that on our job. We'll never have that. So I guess we just have to make do with what we have.
Well, I think we're getting near the end. So I would like to again thank our friends at Key Hose for helping us with this Humpday, the Hangout today. And I appreciate that. And I'd like to thank all of the brothers and sisters who've taken the time to listen to our Hangout today on RIT and go out there and train on this and get better at it and work at it and understand your job in it. And for all of us, I would like to say thank you, and we wish you a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas.